Hello and welcome to the Burgess Crew podcast. Today we're joined by Daniel Smith, a maritime professional with over a decade of experience in commercial shipping and founder of NeuroDiversAtSea. It's a wonderful charity set up to empower, educate and help us all understand what it means to be neurodiverse and the role we can all play in creating a more inclusive environment.
Whether you are a head of department or indeed office staff, if someone comes through and says, hey look, I'm autistic, or I think I might be dyslexic, the one biggest thing you can do and that we should do, don't react negatively, don't react badly, just like, okay, not an issue, how can I help you? What would you like from me? How can I enable you to perform your best?
Daniel is autistic and so brings both professional insight and lived experience to his campaign to bring greater inclusion into the maritime industry. Together we explore the challenges, strengths and opportunities that come with embracing neurodiversity at sea and how the industry can evolve to better understand, support and celebrate all crew regardless of their neurological differences. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have been desperate to talk about this topic for ages now, but there is very little information, there's very little data on neurodiversity in the maritime industry. And, you know, we talk about maritime industry being a little behind when it comes to topics in diversity. Neurodiversity does not seem any different, does it?
No, well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. Yeah, neurodiversity is, as everybody knows, diversity in the maritime space in general is, shall we say, behind the curve of where it needs to be, I think is the most polite way to put that. But particularly with neurodiversity, because it is such an unknown topic generally, it's almost unacknowledged in the maritime space. And it's only been the past couple of years when, I'll be honest, NeuroDiversAtSea has come on the scene and started banging the drum a bit louder than others have been, that it's now started to be noticed and recognised.
Well, it's promising, you know, like I said, we wanted to talk about this topic for ages, but actually doing the research, there's very little information out there. But to see is it a charity?
So we are officially what's known as a charitable incorporated organisation. So we are a charity, but we can run ourselves like a business. A bit like a non-for-profit, basically speaking. So we can charge people for services and we can do all that sort of stuff and we can own property and whatever else. The only stipulation is that any profit we make has to be invested back in the business and back towards our charitable aims and goals and what have you.
Yeah.
So we are technically a charity, but we're also a company at the same time.
Okay, brilliant. Can you tell us, where did the company come from? How did it come about? What led you to create it?
The charity kind of came about because I got really annoyed with the way I was treated. You know, I'd seen other people who I knew were neurodivergent be treated not that great, but in some ways they kind of made their peace with it. You know, they just sort of moved on and it was like, well, that was the way it is. You know, I'd seen colleagues come into the industry who were neurodivergent who then left the industry because the industry just wasn't supportive enough for them, so they quit. I'd seen the struggles that some of my colleagues had faced with mental health because the industry and the way it was treating them. And I'd kind of done little bits and pieces behind the scenes, but I always thought, well, I'll leave it to the bigger organisations to try and do something. I'll leave it to unions. I'll leave it to the flag state, port state. But basically what happened is I applied for a job with a company who I won't name, but what I will say is that they should have known an awful lot better to do what they did. And basically what happened is I had applied for an interview with them, and I was quite honest and open at the time. I said, look, I'm autistic. No issues doing the job, but it may mean that I need a few tweaks to the way the interview process works. Is that going to be an issue? You know, because if it's an issue, fair enough. You know, I don't really want to work for you. And I distinctly remember having the interview and I blasted through the technical stuff. No issues at all. Because the interview is a panel interview. Tech superintendent was like, yep, not an issue, happy with that. As far as I'm concerned, got the job. The vessel master is the same, says, yep, not an issue, you got the job. And it came to the HR questions. And they're usually from a script. Got most of the HR questions until there was one final question that was basically on the lines of, give me a scenario where you have struggled or where you've had to overcome a challenge, I think it was. And I was like, okay, well, can you give me a bit more detail, be a bit more specific? Like, what do you want or mean by challenge? Because challenge could mean 1,001 things. So I said, well, can you clarify? Do you want like an onboard challenge when it was like an emergency situation, or when it was an issue with crew, or a tight time frame that had to be complied with, or something? And then they flat out refused. All they were willing to do, this is the HR person, all they were willing to do was just regurgitate the same question, but louder. It's like, well, that's not really helpful. So I answered to the best of my abilities. And then they asked another question that was almost a carbon copy of the previous one about challenges. And again, asked for clarification. Because, well, the question you just asked me is similar to the one you're asking me now. So does that mean I haven't answered the previous one? Like, what's going on? And they refused. Just flat out like, no, I cannot rephrase the question. This is a script. I have to stick to it. So I was like, okay, well, the answer for that is then this. And then went back and answered the other one. again, just a different answer just in case. I remember watching this HR person take a big black marker pen and just draw a giant line through my application in the interview itself, right in front of me. I remember sitting there thinking, well, that's me out of luck, isn't it? Went away and I kind of thought about it and talked to some people about what happened in the interview and stuff. And I began to realize that actually what happened in that interview was really not okay in any way, shape, or form. Like, it was really, really wrong. So I tried to go hold the company and say, look, bit concerned about what's happened with this. I want to have a chat with you about it because I think you really should have rephrased this stuff. Like, there's no reason why you couldn't have done it. It's a HR question. It's not a technical question. Can we have a chat? And there was a back and forth. And basically, the excuse they used was they didn't know anything about the condition because they hadn't bothered to research it. They hadn't bothered to do any due diligence. And they did apologise. They did sort of say, yeah, okay, well, we made a mistake. But I came away from that and said, right, two options. If that's how maritime treats me, I can do the sensible thing, which is to go and work in IT and make my fortune and forget maritime exists. Or I can do the other option, and I'll try and change it myself. And for whatever stupid reason that I have yet to work out, despite conversations with numerous therapists who have also yet to figure it out, I decided to go down the second option of, you know what, I will change it. I will go down fighting, as it were. And that's where Neurodiversity came from. That specific incident was the catalyst for the charity you see today. It initially was just going to be a website that had some information on it, and that was it. But that then changed to something that's a bit more well-rounded, a bit better founded, that does more than just provide information. We now do advocacy work, we now do conferences and panel talks, and we work with P&I clubs, and we advise different government agencies and stuff, all in the name of trying to make sure that other people don't suffer through what we've suffered through.
It's fabulous because it is opening up those conversations, which is where it all begins. That's where change happens, is to get people to acknowledge that there is a problem in whatever shape or form and to discuss the best way forward. So it is a fabulous website. I've got it in front of me now. And I think neurodiversity is quite a new term. I've spoken to a few people over the last week and a few people asked me what it meant. So can you explain, what do we mean by neurodiversity? What does that mean?
Yeah, so neurodiversity is a new shiny word for something that's quite old. So for as long as human beings have existed on this planet, we've had diversity of thought. We all think differently, we all act differently. That's what makes us human beings, right? Where neurodiversity comes in is it's a newish word to describe a particular group of people whom society think or feel act differently enough from the norm that they need to be classified with a separate definition, right? So basically you have two groups. You have neurotypical and neurodivergent. Okay. So neurotypical basically describes the average individual who thinks, acts, interacts with the world around them, etc., 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 in a way in which the society they're a part of kind of expect, right? Yeah. So that's just the average person walking down the street. Someone who is neurodivergent is basically someone who thinks or acts differently enough because of an underlying condition. So in reality, that's autistic individuals like myself, ADHDers, dyslexics, dyspraxics, dyscalculics, dysgraphics, potentially those who have OCD and Tourette's, although the jury is still out on that at the moment.
So is it an umbrella term?
Yeah, it's a catch-all term.
Okay. And this might be a silly question, but autism, ADHD, etc., are they diagnosed? Because I've heard a lot about, waiting lists for diagnosis, which can be a huge problem. Or is it quite apparent? The reason I ask is on your website, you do offer screening tools?
Yeah, so it's not medical. It's not a substitute for someone going to the doctor and saying, look, I think I might be autistic. Can I be screened for it? Or can we go through the process of speaking to someone who's qualified in it to try and get diagnosis? Those tools are offered basically to give people a rough idea. So if someone thinks they may be autistic, they can have a look at the screening tool, and the screening tool will give them a rough steer as to, actually, yeah, you check up the boxes, or not sure, but it's not a scientific thing as such. It is based on science, but it's not a scientific thing. It's not a substitute for a diagnosis. It will not diagnose you. The only person who can do a diagnosis is a medical practitioner.
Yeah, and it's difficult as well because, from what I understand, there is a spectrum, so it can be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's particularly true when dealing with men and women, because a lot of, say, for example, let's take autism, and I'm only using this because I'm autistic, so I know the most about that condition, right? A lot of the diagnostic criteria for autism and a lot of the conventional traits and tropes of it that you associate with being autistic come about because of studies on male subjects. And what we are now recognizing is that autism affects men and women equally,
Really?
but also differently, because the two different genders have completely different life experiences. So, for example, a lot of people will say, well, to be autistic, you mustn't be social. That's a really common one. You must have no social skills. Yet that trope it doesn't apply in general. It's a lot of garbage, no matter what kind of gender you want to paint it to. But when you apply it to women particularly, because they tend to have different upbringings, different social standards they have to comply with, and they have to learn to do different things at different times, saying to someone, well, because you're social, you're a woman, so you're social, therefore you can't be autistic, doesn't work. Just because they have had to teach themselves to be social to survive in their own environment doesn't mean they're not autistic. All you're doing is there's like an extra layer you have to get through to look at the actual condition itself. But we like to say, well, because we are so accustomed to these historical tropes that to be autistic you must be this and must be that and must be the other, we don't start to look at it and realize actually no, that's not true anymore, because our understanding of that has moved on and moved forward. Whilst the medical world has kind of caught up with that now a little bit, society is still lagging behind.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the maritime industry, but it's not really, it's only just started being talked about on shore as well, isn't it? There's a lot of documentaries that you can now watch, but it's still quite a new and misunderstood
Oh
topic.
God, yeah. It's okay. So take myself for example, right? I do these podcasts. I will stand up on stage and I will give speeches. And I'll take part in panels and I'll socialize and I'll mingle and whatever else at conferences. Now you look at that and go, but someone who's autistic shouldn't be able to do that. That's not something, and yet I am officially going off the stereotype of being autistic. I shouldn't be able to do that. But what we have now learned is because autism is a spectrum, just because I can do that doesn't mean I'm less autistic. I still have my own battles and my own struggles. It just means that I have developed a mechanism to be able to go and push through and do this one specific thing at that one time. Same with ADHD is another great example. Everybody will tell you that, well, someone who's an ADHDer, they just fidget all the time. They don't concentrate, they can't focus, they can't do this, they have to just be shaking and fidgeting and whatever else. Garbage. Absolute garbage. If there is something that is interesting to someone who has ADHD, they will hyper focus on it for hours. And I mean like 10, 12, 14 hours at a go. To the point at which they may forget to eat or drink because they are so focused on this one thing. But we are so accustomed to saying, well, ADHD means you can't focus on anything. No, they just can't focus on stuff that they find boring.
Yeah.
They can still focus. It just happens that they find interesting. Dyslexia, another fantastic example of that. Everybody says, well, dyslexics can't spell. No, they can spell. All you have to do is give them the tools to be able to not get jumbled up as they read things, to not skip around. It's not their fault. It's all these stereotypical tropes that this is going to sound very like I'm being some left-wing lunatic now, but that media plays into quite a lot. Like, let's take autism again. You have Sheldon Cooper, for example. Everybody knows Sheldon Cooper, right? From the Big Bang Theory. Everybody knows, oh, well, he's autistic. He should be a classic autistic person because he's good at maths, good at science, no social skills. I'm awful at maths. I can just about do 2 + 2 with a calculator. You know what I mean? Like, I am awful at it. And yet I am diagnosed autistic and have been for many, many years.
Yeah. But that's why these conversations are so good, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things, it's smashing the stereotype, isn't it? It's that thing of, actually, no, just because we have these misconceptions, and that's what they are, misconceptions, we have to challenge them, we have to combat them, we have to say, well, no, actually, no. Whilst they were based on outdated stuff, we have now moved on and moved forward to recognise, actually, no, it's different now. We've learned more, we understand more.
And also, it's individual, like you've mentioned, it's individual to the person. We're very guilty of like putting people in a box, so to speak.
Yeah, pigeonholing.
And assuming that everyone who has been diagnosed or not diagnosed with, for example, autism or ADHD, all suffer the same.
Exactly. We forget that magic word of spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing. Autism is, the diagnosis is an autistic spectrum disorder or an autistic spectrum condition.
So let's talk about the strengths. Let's talk about how can neurodiversity on board a yacht, what key skills can they bring? What positives can they bring?
So this depends very much on the person, right? So for example, let's play into some tropes and stereotypes. Dyslexics make great engineers. 9 times out of 10, because they're fantastically practical people.
Mm.
And there is nothing more practical than engineering and deck work, right? Particularly when you're under some pressure and things may have gone a bit sideways. I mean, I've worked with some engineers who are dyslexic who I am convinced could have saved the Titanic with some baling twine and duct tape. Don't ask me how, but I guarantee whether they would have MacGyvered some solution out of somewhere that only they would think of. But that's the beauty of a dyslexic person. They are so good at practical thinking and practical skills. You know, ADHDers thrive under pressure because it's exciting. It gives them a dopamine hit. You know, the ship could be on fire, it could be sinking, you could have people running around just losing their absolute minds, and to someone who has ADHD, that is their time to shine, because that is a massive dopamine hit. You know, I'm often asked by people, oh, so what would your ideal fire party look like? Is a great example. And I always say to them, my ideal fire party would be an ADHD and a dyslexic. Because I know that when I set that fire party in, the ADHD is going to love the fact that it's an ever-changing environment and they've got to think about 1,001 things at once. They're going to thrive off that. And I know that if something goes completely wrong and they have to think of a solution on their feet, the dyslexic person will then be able to make that reality. They'll be able to find a solution.
Mm.
But we don't recognise and realise that because we just hear this negative thing about ADHD. You know, we don't see the positive traits, and it's almost like throwing people in the bin without seeing what the person can do.
Yeah, and I was looking at one of your quotes from one of the articles that I was reading, that people focus on supporting what neurodivergent people sometimes need without actually taking a step back to look at the value of that person.
Yeah. We don't recognise the value that comes from enabling people.
Yeah.
You know, I had a chat with someone at a P&I club recently along a similar topic, actually, and it was basically, the point I made was that whilst it's great to talk about, we have to recognise there's a cost to enabling people. There's a cost to making adaptations and adjustments. That can't be helped. But what we don't look at is, what is the benefit of making that adaptation beyond just legal compliance? What actually can be gained from that? We don't do that because it's difficult for us to quantify financially.
Mm.
We can quantify the cost of not complying legally. We can quantify the cost of paying compensation, cost of the bad PR that may come with it, the cost of the court case. But because we don't bother to try and quantify the gain that comes from that person now being able to be themselves on board, that comes from that person being able to flourish and thrive on board, because we don't look at that and go, actually, yeah, that gain far outweighs the cost. Because we don't do that, we always view it in a negative light.
Mm.
And we have to change that. We have to start looking at, well, actually, this person, let's say it's going to cost us £1,000 to make a simple change for somebody on board, right? But making that change will mean that person is now far less likely to go and leave or quit or resign or move on. That person is now going to give the 110%, not 100%. That person is now going to be far more invested, which means the ship is now going to look better because that person wants to make sure it's better kept. They give it their all. 10 grand cost becomes a massive bonus.
Yeah. So what adjustments can be made on board a yacht to accommodate?
So this is, I suppose, where my background on commercial deep sea stuff and the offshore industry doesn't really lend itself all that well to this question. But a lot of it is, I think the biggest thing you can really do and change is actually ask the person, what do you need from me? Whether you are a head of department or indeed office staff, if someone comes through and says, hey, look, I'm autistic, or I think I might be dyslexic, just ask the person, okay, how can I help you?
Yeah.
What's the biggest thing I can do to help make your life easier? And that person will probably tell you. Or I'd love to sit here and give you a full rundown of, well, do this and that and the other and blah, blah, blah. It's really difficult to do that because each change is so individualistic. But the one biggest thing you can do and that we should do is just make it safe for people to come to us and say, look, I'm autistic, or I have this, or I might have the other. And then when that does happen, don't react negatively, don't react badly, just like, okay, not an issue. How can I help you? What would you like from me? How can I enable you to perform at your best? What's your biggest bugbear?
I think it's just useful, for anyone listening who maybe does want to help a colleague or somebody on a yacht, but doesn't know how to, and who maybe wants some guidance. Because it's a topic, any diversity topic. People are afraid of saying the wrong thing, of asking the wrong question.
Yeah, it drives me up the bloody
causing
wall.
offence. So, they may just want some guidance.
From my standpoint, and I think most neurodivergent people will share the same standpoint, I don't care about any of that garbage. I am not going to be offended if you call me autistic or if you say I'm someone with autism. I don't care.
But is that a generic statement for everyone?
I'd say, yeah,
Okay.
9 times out of 10, yeah. If you're not doing it out of
Mm.
malice, which is, I mean, you're not, then
Yeah.
they're not going to care. Because we recognise that we all make, I wouldn't say make mistakes, but we're all a little bit ignorant
Mm.
sometimes to stuff that's new to us. But if you come to someone, if someone says, look, I'm autistic, and you go, okay, well, I don't really know what that is. I've heard the word, but not really sure what it means or what it is or how to help. Talk me through it, educate me, teach me, show me.
Yeah.
I'll give you all the time in the world. And I think most people are the same with this because you recognize that we do have to sort of step up and
Yeah.
do that a little bit. We do have to educate and to
Yeah.
lead sometimes, and that's okay. In fact, it's a mark of being a good leader, isn't it? To be able to sort of stand up and say, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So is that if we were to talk about an inclusive yachting industry, an industry that accepts and embraces and talks to neurodiverse crew, is that what inclusive industry would look like to you? Or
Ooh. For me, an inclusive industry, it's just that. For me, an inclusive industry is one that doesn't care about what you are outwardly or indeed inwardly to an extent. It just cares about can you do the job, yes or no. That's it. We don't judge people because they're a different skin color or because they're a different gender or they're attracted to different people or whatever else. We don't judge people because they have different brains and different minds. All we do is we say this person is a person, they can do the job, who cares? If that person needs support, we help them. We don't shy away from that. We don't try and hide it or push it underneath the rug. If that person says they need help, we help them because they're a human being and that's what they deserve. Because we'd expect the same back. Treat people how you want to be treated. To me, that is what I mean by inclusive industry. That's what I really want to see in yachting, is an industry treats people how they themselves want to be treated, not like numbers that are disposable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. From a crew management perspective, when it comes to recruitment, etc., are there steps that we can take?
Yeah, I mean, stand behind your DEI statements. It's a big one. A lot of the time, people tend to see them as it's just a checkbox that we have to have so we can show that we're being inclusive and that we show that we're being legally compliant. But move beyond just saying it's legal and actually say, well, yes, there's a legal side to it that means we have to do this, but actually, it's far more than just legal stuff. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Just try and understand that someone coming to asking for help is not a bad thing; it's a good thing, and it's only becomes a bad thing if you don't handle it properly. So just handle it how you would want it to be handled. If it was your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife asking for help and support, how would you want them to be treated?
And it goes back to what we said earlier about treating everyone as individuals. Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for NeuroDiverSatSea? Have you got any upcoming projects or?
We have quite a lot on the go, I'll be honest. We're looking at trying to get a new website out at some point in the future. We're looking at trying to do some work with some more government organisations. We're looking at potentially doing a conference of our own or like a symposium or something of our own as well. I want to try and get back on the research horse because we kind of fell off that a little while ago to try and get some more research on the go somehow. We're partnering with the university to do that. So we have a lot on the go. I can't talk about much, but I'll be honest, I'm trying to skirt around what I'm not allowed to talk about.
That sounds very exciting, Daniel. And don't underestimate that what you've done so far because, there is very little conversation around this topic. So you are starting that conversation.
That's the thing, isn't it? It has to start somewhere because it means the conversation starts and it means the industry that I love and may be forced to leave will at some point in the future become inclusive and will treat people like human beings, not like numbers. Because ultimately it's going to have to. Even if that change has to come from me, if we don't change the industry, we're going to realise and wake up one day and go, crap, we have no seafarers. No one wants to come and work for us anymore. Why is that?
No, that's a very good point. It's especially in the UK, seafarers numbers are dwindling, aren't they? And
we're a dying, like we're an endangered species. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if we actually treated ourselves like a species, we'd be on the critically endangered list, labels everywhere. You go around the zoo in the BDSM exhibit, these are the last 2 seafarers in the UK. They're critically endangered sort of thing, which is depressing because I think seafaring, not right now, but I do think it has premise to be a career.
No, it's an amazing career. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting talking to you and learning from you because I think we're all need some educating on this topic, a better understanding of what it means and also how, like you've mentioned, the guidance is changing, it's
absolutely.
The definitions are expanding and it's...
I mean, I struggle to keep up with it sometimes, I'll be honest with you. It's ever evolving. And trying to keep on top of it and keep ahead of it is an absolute nightmare.
But that's where That's what we all need to do, though, isn't it? Is to keep learning, keep reading, and not, don't ignore it as too difficult, because we actually could be missing out on we are missing out on a huge amount of skills that are there. So I think it's, important that we all keep talking about how we can help, what we can do, and let's make those changes. So thanks so much for your time, Daniel.
Likewise, thank you for having me here.